Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. Take a moment to pause. Gently close your eyes or let your gaze soften. Take a deep breath in and exhale slowly, letting yourself settle into this space. Begin to notice where hope lives in your body. Is it in your chest, your stomach, your hands, or somewhere else? Hope might feel subtle, like a flicker, or an expanse, like a warm glow. With each inhale, imagine that hope is a steady flame, growing brighter. And with each exhale, feel it radiate through you, grounding you, inspiring you, and reminding you of your capacity to hold the light and the dark. When you're ready, gently return to the present moment, carrying this connection with you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me for yet another episode. So today is going to be a solo episode, and I want to talk about the idea of the importance of hope and how we hold hope even through difficult or hard times. So this topic came to me because I realized in the last month that I really lost a connection with a sense of hope and with a sense of, wow, things can turn out, things can be good. And it really slapped me in the face in the last month because a couple of things happened. So one, I've talked a lot about IVF and going through that process. And a couple of months ago, well, probably 4 months ago now at this point, we had a pretty big setback of doing an egg retrieval and then not getting any embryos from that, or healthy embryos. And that was just something that I knew was a possibility, but just stunned me into a sense of WTF, like how can this actually be happening? But really, the thing that sent me over the edge is about a month and a half ago, a little bit before Thanksgiving, I went to go get a massage from someone that I know and adore and who I've worked with for a while now, and took off my wedding and engagement rings. I have a set of like 3 rings, and took them off, put them on a coaster she had, and then forgot them. Didn't take them with me. I was really blissed out at the end of the massage and just left the rings there. And when I finally noticed and went to message her about them the next morning, they were not there and they were nowhere to be found. And the people who came after me said that they also didn't know where the rings went or were, and whether or not they were being truthful or lying doesn't really matter at this point. What matters is that my rings are gone. My rings have either been lost or stolen, and I don't know what's happening. And that situation left me with this feeling of complete loss of faith in humanity, and just sort of like, are you effing kidding me, universe or God or whatever you want to call it? Are you kidding me that my rings are lost, that this seriously is happening? So combine that with the IVF stuff, combine that with just the stress and overwhelm that I talked about earlier this summer, which led to burnout and needing to pull back on the podcast, needing to pull back on Happy Rebel things to focus on my therapy clients or myself. And I just felt like nothing could possibly be working out for my greater good in the world. And everyone around me was like, this is not you, Kelly. Like, this is not who you are or how you are in the world. I tend to see things realistically, but I try to see them optimistically as well, with a little bit of glass half full. And with those things happening, I just lost that. So that's the background. And I thought, what better way to think about or talk about hope than to talk about my dream guests for the Happy Rebel podcast? I just really wanted to bring this idea of we can make good, beautiful, wonderful things happen for ourselves. Just like we can be the victim of or fall down on our faces in situations and get into a place where we lose all hope in humanity and in ourselves and in the world in general. And you know what? F that. I want to have some hope. I want to bring that back in. I want to call that up in myself and bring up a little light and levity. And if you are watching on YouTube, but for listeners, I just want to point out that I am wearing a ring. I'm wearing a super amazing $150 ring that I got from one of those travel ring websites, because that's apparently a thing that you can get now, is you can get a really gorgeous looking ring that is a complete fake, so that if you're traveling or going somewhere that you don't want, or there's a risk of your ring getting stolen or lost and you don't want that, you can buy one of these amazing things. So shout out to my fake travel ring. It's working so far, but it's not my ring. Anyway, back to dream guests. You got to balance the light and the dark. And there is some anger and some sassiness and some frustration I feel when I think about my rings being gone. But then I'm also like, look, what can I possibly do about it? I did everything that I possibly could. Looked everywhere, filed a police report, called around to pawn shops, talked to the masseuse. She talked to her clients who were after me. I did everything I could. So you know what? Now it's just up to whatever dimension my rings have fallen into for them to come back. So I'll update you if they do come back. All right, dream guests. My first dream guest for the podcast is the author Thomas More. Thomas More is incredibly meaningful to me. Wow, I'm getting teary. I came across his book, Dark Nights of the Soul, a few years ago, and it turned my mind upside down for a good 6 months. It was such an incredible read. And if you are someone who has experienced depression or just periods of time in your life when you didn't feel like you had anything to grasp onto, or kind of like now, any sense of hope or grounding, that is a book that I would recommend 10 out of 10 times. So Thomas More wrote that book. He also wrote a book, Care of the Soul, that my friend Sarah talked about a couple of episodes ago. And that talks about nurturing your soul in everyday life. It's kind of a deep psychological mishmash of all of these different ideas, but it's really written quite beautifully. Thomas More is known for exploring the depth of the soul and finding meaning in the shadows and the light of life, which is totally up my alley, of course. And I mean, he's written over 20 books. He just has this like huge breadth of knowledge and keeps writing and writing. And I kind of aspire to be like that in my life. Who he is as a person, Thomas More was actually a monk, and he left the monkhood, priesthood, I don't really know, and then became a psychologist. And so he weaves spirituality and psychology and mythology into his work, and just has all of these beautiful insights on the human experience. If you haven't checked out his books and you like reading nonfiction, highly, highly recommend Thomas More. When I think about a conversation I would like to have with him, I would actually, I will just say I have talked to him. He and I have had a few conversations, and I'm super honored and just blown away that he would be willing to hop on a call with me. But Anyway, so I have talked to him, but I would definitely talk to him about how we can embrace the dark and the light parts of our soul and how we can do that in this modern world that we're living in. So I think that would be kind of fun to have a conversation with him about that. Dream guest number 2 is another author, Sue Monk Kidd. So she is, I think, best known for her book, The Secret Life of Bees. And that was a novel, it's bestseller, that explored race and family and healing. And then it was later made into a movie. So a lot of people know her for that. But what people may not know of her books is The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. And that was a book, that was actually the first book by Sue Monk Kidd that I read. And I was, again, just like with Dark Nights of the Soul by Thomas More, I was blown away by her book. It's a memoir about her journey discovering feminine spirituality and kind of reclaiming her spiritual identity. And for me, as someone who came from a conservative Christian background with a male God and a male deity and all of this male masculineness, reading her book and discovering that there was a whole world of feminine spirituality out there blew me away. I didn't really know that that existed until I happened upon her book and went, oh, this is for me, and just felt this tug to read it. And I cried again and again while I read that book. It was beautiful. She also, speaking of feminine spirituality, she also most recently had a novel called The Book of Longings. And that book was kind of this reimagining of a life, of Jesus's life, through the perspective of his fictional wife. And that book, of course, was also widely praised. It was widely criticized because people were very confused about, did he really have a wife? Did this really happen? All of these things. And I just thought it was a really beautiful retelling of that story. So with Sue Monk Kidd, she, I don't believe, has ever done a podcast. And I don't know that she's really interested. I did learn recently, she announced it publicly, unfortunately, that she has Parkinson's disease. So I don't know what her life and her health look like right now, whether she's still writing, whether she's willing to do interviews. But I just would love to speak with her before that's not really an option because of what she's meant to me. And I would want to talk with her. Oh, I'm crying again. This is going to be a really emotional episode. I would love to talk with Sue Monk Kidd about what it was like for her to rebel against her spiritual and kind of societal expectations that she had as the wife of a pastor and how she navigated that. She wrote a whole book about it, but I would love to know more. So there you go. That's Sue Monk Kidd. My third dream guest, I just put my authors in a row here. They're not all authors. I've got 3 authors and 2 musicians. Weird. And honestly, they're probably people that some of you have heard of, but you probably haven't heard of all 5 of them. So the third dream guest is Cheryl Strayed, and she is most known for her raw, unapologetic storytelling. And most people know her for her memoir, Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail. That was a New York Times #1 bestseller for super long time, and then was adapted into an Oscar-nominated film that starred Reese Witherspoon. So if you're thinking about that movie where Reese Witherspoon did all that crazy hiking, yes, that is Cheryl Strayed's story and her book. I love how she just embraces the messy, raw truth of who she is. And she does it in the pursuit of her healing and her growth and sharing that message with people. She also wrote an incredible book, Tiny Beautiful Things, which is a collection of her advice columns from when she was the anonymous online advice columnist called Dear Sugar. A lot of people have heard of Cheryl Strayed. She's been on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast with Glennon Doyle, and she just does this incredible advice-giving thing where I don't know what she's channeling, I don't know what she's connecting with, but the advice that she gives and the truth that she is able to show people about themselves blows me away. She talks a lot about resilience and about grief and about personal transformation. And so, if I were to talk with her, I would like to talk with her about how we find beauty and hope in the midst of our pain and uncertainty. And she and her life speak so well to that, that I think that would just be a really beautiful conversation. I would also love to probably ask her some advice about things. I'm not going to lie that you can't have Cheryl Strayed in front of you and not get a little bit of her incredible advice and clarity about situations. So there you go. That's Cheryl Strayed. My fourth dream guest would be musician Trevor Hall. He really blends spirituality and music, and just his lyrics are so beautiful. His style, he has some kind of like folk reggae and spiritual influences. His albums are, a couple of them are The Fruitful Darkness and Kala. Some of his songs, if you're not familiar with his name, and if you know the names of songs, which would be random, but whatever, are The Green Mountain State, The Lime Tree, and my personal favorite, You Can't Rush Your Healing. And his music really has a lot of deep themes about self-discovery and spirituality. And one of the things I love about him is that he really uses his platform as an artist to promote conscious living and mindfulness. And he draws on a lot of Eastern spiritual practices in his music, but he also just is a damn good lyricist. And you can dance to his songs, you can sing along with them, you can just hum, like they could play them in yoga classes, but then you can also like rock out to some of them. So he's just really fun. I would definitely love to ask him more about his journey. He doesn't really, I don't think I've heard him really talk too much about his personal story, especially when it comes to like mental health. And artists often have to dig really deep to get their material. And his material is so soulful that I have to imagine he's been through some shit. And I would like to talk to him about that shit. So there you go. The last one is another music artist, and that is the artist Banks. So I'm going to get emotional again. You guys, I think that's like 4 times. So Banks is kind of an alt pop R&B artist. She's known for like raw and empowering music. I really think of her as like girl grunge power. And her albums are Goddess, The Altar, and Serpent. So I don't know how I first came across Banks. It was a long time ago. Like when she first came out is when I knew about her. So it's been like 10 years. And I first really became obsessed with her album. I think it was The Altar. No, it was Goddess. And listened to that album over and over again when I got my first tattoo, which was 6 hours long. And so those songs just like played over and over in my head, and they kind of gave me the power to get through the pain of that experience. And more recently, every time I would sit down to write my book, I would put her music on, because her music is exactly it's the soundtrack to my book. The pain, the hope, the rawness, the empowerment, all of that is what I hope that my book gets across. So I would love to talk with her, in part because I just want to tell her how meaningful her music has been to me and how it's gotten me through these like crazy times in my life, from getting a tattoo to writing my friggin' book. So yeah, I would love to talk about that. I would love to talk about how she writes, how she creates, how she puts herself out there again and again in her music. So there you go. Those are my top 5 dream guests. I know they're kind of weird, but hey, that's me. I'm kind of weird. So to bring this back to the idea of hope, I just want to say, even though I've recognized that I have lost a connection with hope over the last 6 months or year, I know that it's there. The reason I did that meditation at the beginning is that I want us all to look to our bodies to find where those feelings, emotions, those sensations live when we don't feel like they're very present or like we can't connect to them. and recognizing that there is often always this tension that we're holding between accepting the challenging, the difficult times in our lives and really allowing those to be there and to feel it, but then also being able to hold on to the light and see hope and to see joy in those moments of darkness. And being able to do that and hold those two places of tension requires courage. It requires vulnerability. And it requires persistence, coming back again and again to remember what that feeling of hope or of peace or of joy is like when you feel like you've lost it. So I just invite you to reflect on your own relationship with hope. Where does hope show up for you in your life? How do you nurture hope when life feels uncertain? And a potential journaling prompt, if you would like one, is when I think of hope, I see, hear, and maybe one small way that you can nurture hope for yourself today is by lighting a candle, playing a favorite song, maybe a Trevor Hall song or a Banks song, or just by stopping and taking one mindful breath. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for exploring hope with me today. And I encourage you to embrace a little bit of hope or peace or excitement or joy as a guiding light, whatever you need for yourself. Just embrace a little bit of that today. Find it in your body. Here's to embracing the light in the dark and hopefully to staying rebelliously hopeful. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.